This is Chapter 6, Section 2. Section 2 will be divided into 2 videos. The objectives explain how territorial expansion brought Americans into conflict with the British and with Native Americans, describe American relations with Great Britain, France, and Spain, and analyze how the political parties' debates over foreign policy further divided them. The 2 political parties we have to start with: the Federalists. You guys have a chart already made. The Federalists were mostly from the North. They were manufacturing. They lived in cities, and they really appreciated trade with Great Britain. The Democratic Republicans were mostly from the South. They were agricultural. They lived in rural areas, and they believed in supporting France and their chance at liberty. Terms and people are here. I thought it might help you. So, how did foreign policy challenges affect political debate and shape American government? The nation had to make peace with Native Americans, control its borders, and establish itself internationally. Renewed war between Great Britain and France threatened neutrality. Americans debated the right response to the European war and to the French Revolution. So, George Washington, our first president, his first term of office dealt primarily with domestic issues and establishment of the government. As you can imagine, that would make the most sense. That was from 1789 to 1793. His second term of office is going to deal primarily with foreign affairs. There will be 3 very important treaties that will be signed between 1793 and 1797. So the new nation faced challenges on its northwestern frontier. What I want you to remember from this is that the Treaty of Greenville will be signed with Native Americans and the United States. The Treaty of Greenville gives the United States control of Ohio. What it gives the natives is the promise that land will never just be taken. A treaty will be signed. Negotiations will happen. A treaty will be signed. Please know from this point forward, every treaty that is signed with the United States and the natives, the United States will break that treaty and another treaty will have to be signed. It's unfortunate, but the natives really don't stand a chance. The natives at this point are considered foreign. This is another foreign country, if you will, that the United States is dealing with. Americans were divided along party lines by the French Revolution, which began in 1789. This is a difficult time. It's a difficult time to deal with France because do you ever really know which government you're dealing with? Before 1789, you dealt with a king. The United States dealt with King Louis XVI. After 1789, the government is very different, and you never know who you're dealing with and what their policies are. The Citizen Genet affair, this affair is unbelievable. France's ambassador in 1793 was Edmond Genet. Edmond Genet is going to come to the United States to commission U.S. privateers to fight for France. So like a U.S. type Navy, when the United States doesn't have a Navy yet, but U.S. privateers to fight for France against Great Britain. Well, the problem with this is any ambassador should go right to the capital, correct? You should find the correct people to speak with, the Secretary of State, the President, and any of those people that you have to speak to negotiate. Well, what Edmond Genet does is he starts in, I believe he starts in Charleston, South Carolina, and he works his way up the coast instead of going to Philadelphia, where the capital is at this point. And he starts negotiating with private citizens before he speaks to the government. You can't do that. Um, he wants to use U.S. ports against the British. Um, he will be recalled as ambassador. He decides he likes the United States. He sticks around instead. However, Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, is embarrassed over this entire affair and will resign in part over this affair. Important to note, George Washington's first cabinet is not his only cabinet. For his second term of office, through the second term, most of his cabinet, all of his cabinet, changes at one point or another. So we're dealing with different people. His second cabinet is not as good as his first. So the Citizen Genet affair really tells us that you never know who you're dealing with the French government. Americans worried about the British and French War, as most of America's imports and tariff revenue came from British goods. Washington doesn't have an army or a navy that it can say, okay, we're going to fight with one or the other of you. And he really doesn't want to do that. He wants the United States to stand on its own, to not have that one friend in Europe that, well, we'll help you in this war because we're going to need you in another. He doesn't want to do anything like that. And the United States isn't strong enough to do anything like that. So in 1793, Washington will issue a proclamation of neutrality, meaning we're not helping either. Great Britain will ignore him and begin seizing American trading ships at sea. This is going to become an issue that's going to build up into the War of 1812, and we'll get there soon enough. Americans were outraged, but honestly, there's little that they can do. The United States is just not strong enough to fight anyone at this time. Washington will send John Jay, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, to London in 1794 to negotiate. He will be there for an entire year, negotiating a treaty which most people didn't like. The resulting Jay Treaty, which goes to the Senate, it comes from the executive branch, but then it goes to the Senate, was narrowly approved. The Federalists loved it, but the Democratic Republicans attacked it. The Federalists praised it because it kept us trading with Great Britain, which is going to make the Federalists probably richer. Great Britain agreed to give up forts on American soil. Weren't they supposed to be gone as of the Treaty of Paris of 1783, which ended the American Revolution? But anyway, they agreed to give up forts on American soil, but Americans had to repay pre-Revolutionary War debts still owed to Britain, and Great Britain is keeping restrictions on American shipping. So, yeah, the United States didn't get too much out of this treaty, but it does keep us trading with Great Britain, which is good for our economy. So this is the second of the three treaties that were signed under George Washington's second term of office. We call it Jay's Treaty. Honestly, there's a much longer name for it, which you guys are not responsible for. A more popular treaty was negotiated with Spain in 1795 called Pinckney's Treaty after the negotiator. The Pinckney Treaty allowed Americans to use the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans, and I'll get into more of the details in a second. With access to the Mississippi, removal of the British, and defeat of Native Americans, settlers poured into the West. So by 1800, nearly 400,000 Americans lived beyond the Appalachian Mountains. What that's going to mean is you get more and more people into an area, and then they can hope to become a state. The United States is going to increase. So the Treaty of San Lorenzo, also called Pinckney's Treaty, same treaty. The Spanish were concerned over the United States treaty with Great Britain because if you think about it, in North America at this time, you have the United States, you have Great Britain and Canada, and you have the Spanish. If the United States is getting along that well with Great Britain that we can have a treaty with them, then maybe the Spanish should have a treaty with the United States as well. The Americans want access to the Mississippi River and a right of deposit. A right of deposit means it's the right to transfer cargoes at New Orleans from riverboats to ocean-going vessels without paying a duty. It will keep the cost of transportation low, which makes anything you're selling cheaper, which means you can probably sell more of it. So the right of deposit means that we can go through New Orleans and out to the Gulf of Mexico without paying a duty. So that's awesome. Um, the United States will have the right to use the Mississippi River and New Orleans for a short period of time. Spain is losing power. They're going to lose control of this area, and the United States is going to have to negotiate with Napoleon. But that's another story for another time. George Washington decided to retire in 1796 after 2 terms of office. He was tired. He didn't want to become president in the first place, and then he decided, okay, I can do this one more thing for my country. He probably could have won a third election, but he was tired. He wanted to go home. He felt that voluntary retirement after 2 terms would set an important precedent for the peaceful transfer of the office. There's a way to vote for a new president. He gave up power, which surprised an awful lot of people. His farewell address is amazingly famous, and in it, he warns of 3 things, and that is going to be your assignment after you finish watching this video. Washington helped the young nation survive early tests. He was their first president. He helped establish a government, which helped open Western land for settlers. He kept the nation out of war. He had proclamation of neutrality, which is going to keep us out of war between Great Britain and France. He didn't choose a side. He helped develop foreign trade. He truly helped out this young nation. He put the nation on solid financial footing. So Washington had a lot to be proud of, but now it's time for a new president. The second president of the United States will be John Adams. He will be elected in 1796. And that is topic for the next video.